All right, guys, back again. iCoach VIP members. Guys, today I have a very special guest. This is somebody that basically started with me from like the very, very beginning. Back in the day, back when I was at 24 Hour Fitness, 18, 19 years old as a personal trainer. And I tell him all the time, I'm like, if he wasn't there to mentor me from the very beginning, I don't know if I would have ever stuck with it and stayed in the field. So, Mr. Marc Coleman, how are you, my man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on there, Mark. I've been hearing a lot of good things about what's been going on your side of the world, so I'm just happy to be a part of everything.
Well, thank you, my man. I appreciate it. So, for the viewers that are watching, those that don't know who Marc Coleman is, give us a little bit of background. You know, who are you? Like, how did you kind of, what did you go to school for? Like, how did you get into the field? And then what are you doing now?
Okay. Well, it goes way back. I'm not going to date myself with that age, but it goes way back in my college days, playing a little bit of sport, football, track, baseball. And at the college university, I went to Eastern New Mexico. I decided to get a little bit more involved into kinesiology and sports human movement there. Back then, there was education in that field. It was just strength training. It was just, you go to the gym, you lift weights and so forth there. So as I was studying, I decided to use that information coming into the real world with working from a personal trainer standpoint. At 24 Fitness was with 24 Fitness for about 12 years, so to speak, 12, 11 years there. And then I decided to move on into the world of sport avenue of athletes being trained to understand how to enhance it. And I really came from college, human movement, sports, performance, and I wanted to move into the world where I was doing a little bit more impact with training, not just being in there trying to push a lot of weight, and want to understand about how the body moves in different arenas of any type sport, as well as general population as well. And I didn't want to just be stuck in a place where I wasn't getting as much impact from other areas. And so my background was more so about the human movements and sport, and I didn't want to have to be, confined to just a gym facility. I want to have a little bit more indulgement in how I can help a lot more in other avenues and put together strength training programs and enhance speed development, as well as correctional type avenues for sport athletes.
Nice. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, I think that's been something that you've really dove into, like, even more. I mean, back when I was working with you at 24 Hour Fitness, I remember you working with like Jason Terry a little bit. I remember you working with like Marcus Spears, I believe so. Was that right? So you work with even professional athletes now.
Yes.
Are you, so, and then current?
Yeah, sure do. And say it again. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Currently, as of right about now, the athletes in which I'm working with, as well as my staff working with there, is that from all over like I started with, is that I want to study more sport, human movement, not just a football sport or a basketball sport. So taking on those professional athletes, and even up to today there, the reason why we are taking on these individuals is because they now know that the importance of these sport human movement patterns, and not just strength and power. Because as you get farther and farther in your professional career, no matter what sport you're in, there's only so much strength and power that you're going to get from your body. Now it's trying to figure out how you can keep moving with the avenue of being able to understand what you can and can't do. Can you move in a transverse plane? Can you actually stabilize in a sagittal plane? A lot of these things there, believe it or not, a lot of professional athletes, they either get to a certain point in their life to where they didn't know about that because they was gifted athletically, and then they actually go and perform, and then once they lose a movement pattern, it's like, oh my goodness, what's happening to me? And it's very concerning no matter what athlete you are, where you will run into these issues because your body is only going to give you so much as what you can move with there. So a lot of these individuals, like you mentioned, from basketball professional athletes to football professional athletes to even some of the baseball professional athletes in whom I work with there, a lot of these individuals are coming from just living off that God-given ability to be athletic. Then it gets to a point to where millions of dollars in the contract starts to kind of disappear. These zeros start to disappear, and all the GMs and all these other avenues of the team sport was come back and tell them, well, you just don't move the same way. You just don't have the velocity in your rotation, or you just can't actually stabilize here. They understand the sport from that standpoint. So that's the easy part for me to understand, to relate to them and say, hey, if you're an athlete at this high level working with Jason Terry or whoever individual that is actually out there that we put out there on the field, they are now getting a little bit more understanding of that. Hey, when it comes to strength training and sport performance training, it's more than just let me see how much I can lift or move. So a lot of these avenues that we are trying to teach in our profession, in our business, is that, hey, sport performance training is more. It is functional. It is actually stabilization. It's mobility. It's understanding the correctional needs to be able to have these individuals go far there. So yes, some of these football players or so forth, they do not have the education, even in the professional locker rooms. Believe it or not, they do not. Some of the individuals who we work with from the Cowboys, they have no clue about how to overcome some of their issues with mobility, and it's not offered there. So that's the big thing about what we're doing here, is offer a lot more in that avenue.
Yeah. Well, and I can testify to that because I remember, I'll never forget, DeMarcus Spears was laying on the ground and you were taking him just like through some, like thoracic type of mobility drill. And that man was sweating more than I had ever seen, and so that was one thing that really just blew my mind. Is I was like, man, here's this really high level professional athlete, and he's just laying on the ground stretching, like sweating his ass off.
Yeah, and that's the big thing in the business that I'm in, is that those athletes, like DeMarcus Ware, like Marcus Spears, like Jason Hatcher, a lot of these guys, where they're coming from is that they were just gifted to be able to move faster, push harder, push more, but they were not gifted to be able to understand about when their mobility is actually being compromised for whatever reason. They didn't understand why they couldn't move left, right, or get out of their stance there. So just some of the things that who you mentioned about, yes, he could not move. He couldn't move. He came to me and said that, hey, there's something wrong with me, but there's nothing wrong with me physically. I just can't move. And I actually started to go through some of those correction type items where it's like, hey, part of everybody's sport is movement. No matter what the sport is, it's movement. Unless you're playing chess, they call it a sport, but part of everyone's sport is movement. So once those movement patterns are actually being compromised, someone has to go in and start to educate them and say, okay, let's go ahead and start some of that correction pattern there. So a lot of these guys, when they actually come to me there, and this is actually some of the things that these sport elite athletes will say, hey, Mark, I hear that you can actually get me some numbers. What numbers mean is dollar signs on their paycheck. They don't come find me and say, I need you to make me stronger, faster. No one has ever said that. No one has ever said that. From the elite point there, they have never said that, because what they hear from the GMs and everyone else is saying that you can't move. So in order for me to actually get them to understand where they need to be is actually, hey, let's go ahead and check and see what your thoracic mobility look like. Hey, can you actually get hip knee flexion? So all of that combined with some of these elite athletes that get paid like millions of dollars, it's not about, hey, how strong can you get now? It's like, hey, can you actually be able to get into this position? What I'm talking about is trainer talk. And this plane of motion that helps you be.
Wow. That's amazing, and it's interesting that they come to you with the question of, you know, from a dollar sign standpoint. That's hilarious, because there's no concept of like, you know, like you as a trainer, as a coach, you know, as a sports performance specialist, like, I mean, obviously you know why they're having issues, but they don't even think about that.
Yeah, don't think about it.
In turn. So that kind of transitioning, what are some of the biggest issues that you see? You know, you mentioned mobility, maybe there's others as well, but what are some of the biggest issues that you see with people coming to you, not just professional athletes, but maybe even college and high school athletes as well?
Okay, some of the biggest issues is that I would see is freakish athletes that have utilized their max power, their max speed and acceleration, where they have train wrecked the system because it is repetitive type torque on the bones, the ligaments, the muscle tissues, and now they're not able to have mobility in the hip complex and the thoracic. So when I see these individuals, I kind of already know what I'm about to go into. Is the hip complex and the thoracic. They can't turn their spine, and the hip flexors and the psoas major is just way too aggressive, because a lot of these athletes are using a lot of their power strength, of course, through the hip region there. So whenever I see these individuals there, what's happening is that they just can't move through the spine because the hip complex is actually locking down the spine. So most everyone, and even some of the guys that's about to come in next week, is about to be the start of what everyone says and knows about combine training to get ready for the NFL combine or the pro days. And when the guys come in, and they'll be coming in, and most of what I'll see is that the hip complex and the thoracic is not able to be as efficient as what they were in high school, because in high school the car wreck wasn't as big. In football, the basketball player hasn't at high school hasn't had enough time jumping up and down and cutting on the court. So at that time, those athletes, the younger athletes at the high school level, they have a little bit better thoracic hip mobility, although it's getting bad because they're not being able to understand about training modules. But when these guys come in, these guys get ready to go to the next level, it's hip complex. So what it boils down to is that at this highest level, they've already have been through enough train wrecks to where the body says, I'm not able to respond to be able to accelerate and decelerate my spine. So that means the torque that's going to be built up on the spine is going to start to have some issues with shoulder mobility, hip mobility, and what everyone knows with some of the soft tissue damage with the hamstrings. If you are a elite speed individuals, you will start to have some of these high risk type issues with elite athletes there. But a lot of the things that we'll see here, what I'll see on a daily basis with these individuals that get to this highest level, is like the thoracic and the hip is just not able to be able to move in the sagittal, frontal, or the transverse plane efficient. And they don't even know why. They just feel that something is wrong with me, but it's just basically you just been into this world of you train, you play. There's only so much that your body's gonna feel that it can be able to uphold before there's too much torque on these bones, ligaments, muscle tissues there. So you gotta find out where I come in, find out, okay, these are some of the weaknesses. This is like an issue where we can kind of get ready to work with before it compromises your whole overall ability to be able to play whatever sport you're in. But it's sad that at our level of athletes today, because we can teach power, strength, and speed. I mean, you can go Google, go to the books and so forth. Everybody got power, strength, and speed. This power, strength, and speed has a timeline and a box where your body says that, okay, you've already exceeded your box and your timeline about how much power, strength, and so more of your mobility, your function, and your stabilization when you're here. Power, strength, and speed. If you can't promote your one of the elite athletes, everyone may know, I'm not going to mention any names because he typically plays on Sundays sometimes. This particular athlete came to me like, 3-4 years ago. And he's an elite athlete. He plays on Sundays. He kind of plays in this town. And he's a individual that constantly gets injured. Now, this individual that constantly gets injured 4 or 5 years ago, he was one of those individuals that was a playmaker. Now, he's a injury individual. And 4 or 5 years ago, when I actually mentioned and worked with him, I was like, hey, you cannot keep this arrangement of your training, even though you're a freak of athletes, more functional mobility things that help keep your support of your speed and mobility and so forth. But that's where we're going with that. This is how these athletes lose their dollar signs because they can't move. They may be freaks, but now they can't move, and so that puts you in a bad situation there. So really what we're going through is that first question you answered, like what I see most of, and that is it, is the hip mobility, spine mobility, and then that means you're going to have a lot more issues with injuries, and that's what that particular player is going through, a lot more injury. And that was 5 years ago. It caught up with him about 2 or 3 years ago. Now he's not playing every Sunday. He's kind of just hanging out with some of his teammates, and that's what the issue is in the field that I'm in, is actually trying to overtake that and decrease the amount of unnecessary injuries where you can see how things can be there. So spine mobility and hip stability, those are the biggest ones I see.
Wow. But, and it's kind of one of those things that makes me think, it's like a lot of us think we're invincible until we're not, right?
Yeah.
Like, most people aren't proactive, they're reactive, right? And so, you see it all the time, right? And it's not their fault because, I think if we trace it back and we go into their college experience, we go into their high school experience, we go into, even before that, there's not a huge emphasis in mobility, right? Like, I mean, I think maybe over the last few years, it's gotten maybe more of an emphasis, but, like a lot of these guys playing in the NFL right now or the NBA, like they didn't even know what a foam roller was when they were playing college ball,
Yep. And that's exactly what we're actually, speaking about too there. Even at the elite level, there is not as much emphasis in education on some of the things that help these individuals be able to keep promote a longer lifespan in their sport. Check this out. We've been playing sports for centuries there, right? In today's world, it's 2019 now. We have more injuries in today's world. Yes, we have more athletes, more injured in today's world than what we had back in the 1960s. And the reason why, because we got freaks of athletes. That means you got more torque on your body. That means you'll be at a higher risk of injury. So the education of what individuals need to be more aware of and promoted with is mobility, stabilization, and being able to move a lot in all those three planes of motion there. So it doesn't matter how strong I get an athlete or how quick or how fast I get an athlete, if I don't teach the avenues of being able to understand that, hey, you do have to be able to utilize these correctional type things, the foam roller, the tiger stick, the super bands where you go through your mobility type things. It doesn't matter because everyone has a timeline where the body says like too much torque, too much resistance. I'm not going to be able to handle everything you're putting into this realm of the body there. So yes, when this comes into play, we have freaks of athletes. These athletes are basically, they're off the chart. There's no way the human body can keep trying to run 4-2 or bench 500 pounds or squat 700 pounds and then go out on anybody's playing field and say, oh yeah, I'm good to go for another 2, 3, 4 years of doing the exact same thing. Your timeline is not going to match up with that. So over the time frame of us being able to educate some of these athletes, yes, we know strength, power, speed is crucial in every sport, but hey, how are you able to keep allowing your system to be able to be at a top-notch level if correctional type movements, flexibility, and just being able to understand how your training program has to be manipulated before you reach to a point where it's just like, well, this is not going to be so well thought out with injury prevention, you trying to squat 600, 700 pounds, for 2-3 months in a row there. So that's where it comes into where these elite athletes have to be a little bit more educated when I see them there.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that's such a great point. And I mean, I think back to from the very beginning, and that was one thing that I think I learned from the, really early on, which was like, when you speak on like the program, right? And you speak on like, hey, you can't do, the same thing forever. Like, so like periodization, right? And like the importance of periodization. So can you talk to people like, maybe like, maybe we're thinking about the viewer as a parent that has a kid that plays sports, okay? And what I want to try to do is just show the example of, hey, here's a whole entire year, right? And like, here's a timeline of like kind of what that periodization could look like, right? And kind of putting different emphasis. You know how you would always take us through all those different types of programs and everything would be periodized. So maybe just speak on that a little bit and the importance of it.
Yeah, okay. In the program designing of certain athletes, when I say certain athletes, there's, you have your, what we work in professionalizations in the modules of training can vary from athlete to athlete groups, just because it's not the same as far as like how a program can help enhance the overall development of speed, power, deceleration, and so forth there. So a quick little kind of like synopsis in that arena there. If we're dealing with most of the younger kid athletes, not in high school yet, middle school, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Now the periodization for them really is ground force reaction. How many times can we get them to utilize the ground? This helps a young athlete be able to be an athlete. So we will have like a 4-week time period, 4 to 5 week time period, where these athletes are trying to just use the ground and the sagittal plane, frontal plane, and the transverse plane. We go through that for about 4 weeks to help them be able to like just try to use the ground and use their body awareness there. Then there's a little bit of a time where we transition into like acceleration and deceleration there. So not to get too over the top with just program design, but we have these weeks set up to where our athlete groups at this level has to be like work with 4 weeks in this arena, 4 weeks in this arena, 4 weeks in this arena. Then we try to combine it and try to involve a little bit more intensity with those patterns that we just mentioned about young athletes trying to be strong and just be athletic, using their own body mass before they get to the next level there. Then we fast forward to the high school. Periodization now becomes more about, the strength process and stabilization process, stabilization and strength process there. So we break it down into a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks at this level and 2 to 3 weeks at that level. But remember, at talking about the high school periodization there, high school athletes are already training in school. So we have to be careful when they come to us, because we're doing more performance specialist training, not just put them in the gym at high school, they go through, your squash and bench presses and so forth. Those are strength type programming. So when we get them, we're going to emphasize more on the weakness of those athletes and say, hey, our periodization now for you guys is to be able to develop a power strength routine in the dynamic world of sport. And all I just said was that utilize your power and strength in this realm for about 3 to 4 weeks, how we jump off a box, how we utilize movements on the bungee, how you be able to produce a certain amount of power and speed with sport movement patterns there. So high school can be different from the middle school. And then if we fast forward to the collegiate, as we periodize some of the things where these individuals go, everyone has a certain timeline and when they can be with us. So our collegiate athletes, when they come in during the summertime, what we're doing is that we're creating an avenue of where their weaknesses are. We're not creating an avenue of, hey, they got to get strong, got to do power strength. It's no. These athletes are already coming from a strength program. We're now trying to understand about where they're at with weaknesses. And fast forward to the elite athletes. Elite athletes, we're not even really putting them in a power strength deal. Zero. What they're going through is what we talked about earlier. They're going through where are your issues at and what can and can't you do with your spine, your hip, your gastrocnemius, the shoulder girdle, all of these things there. And that is more correctional. That is where most of our elite athletes come in, and this is what they're doing. They're not doing power and strength. They're utilizing how to get to a point so their bodies are ready to get into the season, because everyone outside of that, from high school to collegiate to the elite individuals, they already have a strength program going. A lot of it I don't always agree with, but they have a strength training program going. So we periodize a little differently from level to level, but every level has a certain way to where, hey, high school athlete, yes, you're now squatting 225. You can't squat 300 pounds because you want to know why? You have knee valgus and then your hip spine starts to get out of whack. So why would I want you to actually try to do your 1 rep max at 300 pounds? This is what you're going to work with. The periodization for you and for this group, we're going to be working with 200 pounds, and we're going to be doing a certain amount of sets of this for only about 2 to 3 weeks. Now it's time to go to the next level where we're not utilizing still more than that 300 pounds. We're going to be utilizing your own body weight to actually superset a avenue of strength and power. So every level has a different periodization, because like I said, we're not just focusing on the elite level or the young kid level. We're utilizing a lot of things we do here is from all over the place, from football, baseball, lacrosse, soccer, softball, gymnastics. So a lot of things we're doing, the periodization can be varied based on what group we're working with. So it changes from group to group, but a lot of these things where it comes to the sport performance, I specialize in the avenue of not allowing the human body just to be torn down and not built back up. So when I spoke about from college, learning about sport human movement, basic thing about sport human movement is really be able to move. So every avenue of it, whenever we go through the middle school, the high school, the collegiate athlete to elite athlete, they all have a different periodization there. That's what's really missing in most of our actually sport world, because in our sport world, believe it or not, they put everybody in the same periodization. From high school to high school get their periodizations from college, and the college get their periodizations from the pros, but they don't fit. They don't fit. So that's why we have a huge amount of injuries, because these guys are getting way too strong and powerful, but can't handle the human body movement when it gets put into play. So the periodization really is, it varies based on the group of athletes and possibly the level of athletes, because you do not need to be in a periodization. We'll put high schools in a strength periodization for about, maybe 6 weeks, where they're just kind of utilizing to try to get a little bit of their strength level. I would not do that to an elite football player, because he's already reached that avenue. It's not about strength and power for him. It's about, can he translate and accelerate and decelerate his movement pattern and be very efficient? Not, can I get him to get 30, 40, 50 pounds more on his bench press? It is not that. So it changes and it varies from level to level there.
I love that. I think that's such an important piece to touch on because, you know, I think you see it all the time. You'll see parents, right, who want their kids to, they want to do things for them. They want to get them better. They want to develop them. But do you see parents maybe making a mistake in that they're putting too much on the kid? Like the kid's doing too much volume, right? Like, I mean, I see it all the time. You know, the parent will have them, they're in a sports program, they're in a select league, they have a personal trainer, they have a speed and agility coach, you know, they have all these things, and they actually end up overtraining, you know, and end up enabling them to, you know, maybe enabling an injury. So can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure can. Yes, in this world today, in Texas, it is probably the most gruesome world when it comes to parent involvement with young athletes. And parents in Texas, I say Texas because when I get other athletes moving from Wisconsin or Michigan and so forth, they all say, man, you guys are crazy down here. You guys got like a skill coach, you got like a strength coach, you got like a coach that just work with you got a coach and what trying to accelerate their athlete to get to that next level. What happens is that they're competing with Johnny and Susie and Timmy and John, more than indulging in the parent arena there. What I would typically, I speak with a lot of parents, so I typically tell a parent that is the most important thing for your young athlete is you do not involve yourself in what you think is right. Because what's going to happen is that you're going to actually utilize too much of what you feel is right and push your young athlete over the ledge. And when your young athlete is over the ledge, now they're just trying to do it because they say mom and dad is going to be mad at me if I don't do it. And then this creates the burnout stage, and then this creates no way how any coach can help this athlete because they're already done in their mental mindset. So in speaking with some of the parents, you got to float on that surface very calmly because all they want to hear is that, can you get him to that next level? Can you get him strong? Can you get him more powerful? That's all they want to hear. But when it comes down to the young athlete and the parent involvement there, it's a little bit more of an avenue where I take a certain amount of steps. I'll kind of see what the parent feels about their young athlete. Then I kind of give the parent a couple of things about what your young athlete is going through. They're going through this. They're competing against other athletes trying to, get more playing time. Okay, that can be a little bit stressful for a young athlete. They're competing against this. They're having to push their bodies a little bit more than what you did or what we did when I was young. I didn't do this much training to play a sport. I was outside a lot playing with my friends, but I wasn't doing as much training, so I never burnt out on a sport. I never burnt out mentally or physically on a sport. But the parent in which I give them the story is that your young athlete has to be able to train, but in an environment where you're not actually putting on the calendar excessive amount of hours to where he or she is going to say, man, I'm having to practice, go to this skill coach, go to this trainer performance, then I got to go play. Those things add up. So whenever it comes down to some of the young athletes and some of the things that they're going through, usually it's the parent, and we will actually speak with the parent, not in the sense of trying to guide them, but enlighten them what the athlete is going through. So they kind of have an understanding, because back in, like I said, I'm not going to date myself, back in my day, when the season was over, you either move to the next sport or you outside playing. My mom and dad wasn't taking me to the skill coach or this. It wasn't anything back there for one. It wasn't taking me there. So I never had a chance to say, man, I really hate this sport. So that's where I come in and try to enlighten the parents and say, hey, you know, your young athlete does not have to be in the gym or in a performance facility, you know, every day. Sometimes they just need to be a kid and then let them be a kid. Yes, they can actually get off that video game and that couch and come in to train a certain amount of hours, you know, in the week. But sometimes you just have to let them be a kid. That prevents the burnout stage there. So in speaking with that, in this world of sport performance there, a lot of times the parents, they can be more enlightened too. Sometimes just for them, they're in this world of competitive. My boy, my girl, they're not going to be able to get that position because someone else is working harder or someone else is doing this there. They don't understand. So some part of our job is to let them know that, hey, just because little Johnny or little Susie is doing more hours here or there, it doesn't mean that they're going to be that much better than your boy, your girl. It may mean that someone may burn out a little bit faster than the other by the time they get to high school. So if you're looking out for the well-being of your child, it should be, hey, let me create an environment to where they can compete and not have to have excessive amount of hours where every coach in the DFW is actually in their schedule. It can be managed very well. And every sport has a different arena with these talks with the parents, because there's some sports where it's going to require a little bit more hours, for sake like gymnastics. And then there's other sports such as soccer, volleyball, and football, to where it can be a little bit grinding, and you do need to have some times where they can actually say, hey, mom, dad, this is not something that they have to do on a daily basis where it's a couple hours in the gym. You do not have to do that. And I have a little boy and a little girl that are in sports right about now. And I don't really involve myself into their too much of their programming outside of it. What I would do is I would speak to my little girl and little boy and say, hey, how you feeling? What you doing? How's everything going there? And mentioning those hours would be more for me as a parent would be, hey, let me see if my little boy, my little girl are just grinding so much where they're hating the sport and hating their teammates and so forth. That's when you know that, okay, you're on the gas pedal too much trying to get all this training there. So it's not really where the young athlete has to be in everyone's schedule to perform. The parents just has to be enlightened about, hey, just because these athletes are doing so many hours, it doesn't mean your athlete is going to fall behind. Just be more efficient with the training when they go train, but don't overconsume so many hours to where your young athlete is like, this is not going to be something I want to keep doing there.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's some great advice. I think that, you know, it's maybe easier said than done, especially in Texas parents. But Mark, so last question I want to kind of dive into. I know you're busy.
Yeah.
I want to respect your time here. But if you had one piece of advice, so obviously you're local. You know, some people that are watching this will be and hearing this are local, but a lot of them aren't. If you had one piece of advice for parents that were looking to work with somebody like you or a facility like what y'all have, what would be kind of like your number one piece of advice? Because there's a lot of them out there, right? So in terms of finding one that's a good fit, that's going to kind of have this philosophy towards sport, what's maybe like your number one or a couple pieces of advice for parents looking for something like that?
Good question. My best advice to give to a parent just trying to get involvement with their young athletes, with the training and with the performance of what they may do in the sport, is to search and visit facilities that has a little bit more insightful manner about human or functional movement. Now, it can be kind of tough, but these are some of the key little words that you can look out for there, that you know that, okay, I'm going to go search and get a little bit more wealth of information where I can go to there. If you, search online or so forth, or if you go and visit a certain facility, some of their philosophies should be is to improve. You just don't want to get caught up in speed, power, and strength, because those places may produce speed, power, and strength, but like we just mentioned before, do they help the human body movement be able to utilize all of that? So when you go to these places there, go ahead and research and just go in and ask, or even on the phone, if you can ask to speak to the performance trainer or anyone that is, working in facilities, like, hey, what is your philosophy of training training young athletes? Somewhere in that philosophy should be improvement, functional movement, improvement, human movement, because now you know you may be in a spot to where the training is going to actually give more insight information about these young athletes being able to move, because the young athletes need to be able to understand how to move to be able to create anything that has to do with power, strength, development there. So key words to look for: human movement, functional movement, mobility. If in their philosophy or what they believe in, if it's in there, they don't want to go back and fall on their face and not produce that with their protocol. So that would be the biggest thing I can give to parents, is when you go to these sport performance places, don't just look at speed, power, development there. Those are all good because everyone's doing it. You're going to get it anywhere you go with sport performance, but look and see if they actually give a little bit more insight about, oh yes, we increase human movement. We get the athletes to be able to understand functionality, how their limbs, how their right foot moves, how the left foot moves, how they turn, how they work with all these positions there. So look for human movement, mobility, functionality of the human body there. Those are the key words to look for when you go and try to find places such as like still to be able to understand that, okay, I may have a good spot I can go to help my young athlete there. So those are the keywords. It would be helpful to be able to like produce that. So overall, it could be a little bit tough, but just cue yourself on those keywords and say, okay, I already know I'm gonna get from on the phone or online, oh, speed, power, strength, agility, great. Do you help in, human movement when young athletes trying to balance and so forth there? So that would be the biggest scenario there on that one. That's what you'll look for in that arena there. So yes, if parents are trying to get a little bit, insight information there, functional movement, mobility, stability, those will be the key words, and that will lead you a little bit better in the right light.
I think that's great advice. So Mark, if they are local and they have the ability to come work with the man, the myth, the legend, where can they find you at? Where's the facility at that you work at? And then do y'all have website or anything like that as well? Or?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. The website is still being built. What I'll do is I'll actually send you that link, because we changed a little bit on it, but I'll send that link to get out to whoever there. But where we're at, we're the Lab MXF3 Sport Performance, and we're located in Carrollton. And the address is 2800 North I-35 Interstate. and it is in Carrollton. And you can reach myself. There's other coaches, myself and Coach Josh Green there. The contact number, if you like, it is mine is 214-557-6020. My email, it is Marc, M-A-R-C, .13@gmail.com. And I will give you that link once we just change over some things with our website that's being built there. But I will send that to you, so I know it's an inconvenience because it could be better if I had it right about now with that website link there. But I would be able to get you that here real soon, and that will help out a little bit more of that. But yeah, but that'll be the way you can actually reach us at that. But yeah, we're located in Carrollton, and we do the sport performance work and help a lot of athletes. Doesn't matter what athlete you are, or doesn't matter what level you are, we work with them all.
Awesome, my man. Well, I love that. Yeah, and as soon as you send that to me, I'll post that in the show notes right underneath this, and then in the podcast, so they'll have it. Marc, thank you so much, my man. I really appreciate you taking the time. I've been in the nutrition realm now, so I'm kind of out of the whole training space. But this is a good one, man. I think that this is going to be something that will definitely add value and be able to help, especially the parents out there. I think there's some really good takeaways. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having that. Anytime, Marc. Anytime. We'll get together again there.
Awesome. I'm going to close this out here, and then we'll finish out together.
Okay.